And what would you like to do, Mr. Lawrence?
I said I'd like to remove B,
Remove item B.
and the reason is, this is a city council, it had nothing to do with the city council. It had nothing to do with the city of Biloxi.
4B or 5B?
That would be 4B.
4B. This is something not related to us. This is a private business concern. So I'd just like to remove that off the agenda completely.
All right, I seconded that. I agree with Mr. Lawrence. Any discussion?
I believe that we should have the courtesy to at least allow the person to get here before we remove an item and let them speak. So maybe when we get to that item, you could make that motion. Just a suggestion.
I'm sorry she's not here.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Deming, did you have a comment?
No, I agree with Councilman Barrett. I think we should leave it on the agenda. If she doesn't make it for the time when it comes up on the agenda, we address it that way, but it gives her the opportunity to be heard on her item.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Well, Felix,
All right, the motion.
question that removed B.
Yeah, Mr. Gaines, any comments? No comments. No comments, okay. We've had discussion. We'll call for the question. On the motion to suspend the rules. All in favor of suspending the rules? Right, we're not voting on the motion. We're just suspending the rules right now. So that's voting in favor of suspending the rules. I've got 1, 2, 3. Mr. Lawrence is 4.
That's just suspending the rules.
Okay.
5. Okay, that's a 5-1 vote. The discussion centered around removing item B. All right, all in favor, I need a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Hang on.
Just in time, they suspended the rules to remove
Just before the motion,
the motion to remove.
Ms. Newman is here now. We've not,
I'm for letting her speak.
they
During discussion.
Okay.
hang on just a minute. A lot of murmuring going on in here. Ms. Newman, you just arrived. We're about to conclude discussion. The motion to amend the agenda had not been made or seconded. Any comments on suspending the rules to remove item B, which is your motion, your resolution?
I'd like to hear why you want to remove it.
I believe Mr. Lawrence made the motion and I seconded that. Mr. Lawrence, I believe it's accurate to say that this is not city business, has nothing to do with the city.
Right. The statement is that this is the city council. That is a private concern, has nothing to do with the city or the city of Biloxi. That is something they have to handle, and it's not at the business. That's a business issue, not a city council issue, not a city issue. I mean, you have a lot of things taking effect when you put and change this thing for one person. When you change the meeting, you change 20, 25 people from the city council that comes to the meeting. You change the meeting itself, and we've never adjusted any meeting for any council. And you have a problem here. This is strictly going to one person working for a council member. And that's not the right thing to do with the city council or the city of Biloxi. So those things are not good for the setting up. So we don't change meetings for people's employment. The meeting's been the same. Since y'all been here, it's always pretty much the same thing. You have a problem if you change this and go into overtime, you got $36,000 worth of overtime pay, minimum. Somebody got to account for that. And that's not the responsibility of the citizens of Biloxi to be paying overtime pay for one person. So there's a lot of issues dealing with this thing. That's just, and I would remove it, just because there's no reason for us to even vote on a private business issue. And that's what you're dealing with here. It had nothing to do with the city or the council.
You're welcome to comment, Ms. Newman.
First of all, Your Honor, all I'm asking for is a time change. It has nothing to do with my business interfering with your business. I'm asking for a time change to 4 p.m. okay? Not only I'm asking for my livelihood to be able to be there as well as be here to represent my people as been elected to do. All I'm asking is for some consideration to change the time so that I can do both, because I would love to be able to do both. And we got an email last night from a constituent who was saying, you know, these meetings are at 1:30. People who work can't make these meetings. So a 4 p.m. meeting might actually help these constituents make the meetings. So I don't know what the big deal is.
Okay. Any other comments for discussion?
the
Well,
big-
Just a moment, Mr. Lawrence. So where we are is, we concluded the motion to suspend the rules. We're now looking at approving the amended agenda, and if we approve it, then item B will be removed from the agenda. If it's defeated, then item B will remain on the agenda, and we'll have further discussion at that time. So, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
You asked for discussion, and are we not in that anymore?
We're not in that anymore. When we started the meeting, when we started the meeting, there was a motion to suspend the rules. Mr. Lawrence explained why we were, Mr. Lawrence explained why we were suspending the rules. He made the motion, I seconded that. Mr. Lawrence explained his reason, and then there were a couple of comments. Then we concluded discussion. We voted on that 5-1 to suspend the rules so that we could revise the agenda. That's where we are now. So if you vote on it right now, if you vote to approve the amended agenda and it's successful, item 4B is moved off the agenda. If it's defeated to amend the agenda, then it remains, and we'll have discussion when we get to that item on the agenda.
However,
Can I insert something?
Sure.
The procedure was done improperly. We vote to suspend the rules, then the suggested amendments are made, and then you have discussion on the amendments. So your discussion was prior to the suggested amendments being made. So I was under the assumption that we would have discussion for the amendments that were going to be made. I know he did say it, but he said it before we took the vote on whether we were going to suspend the rules, which is improper to exclude discussion on the proposed amendment.
We did have discussion briefly on the amendment.
Prior to taking vote on whether we wanted to suspend the rules or not.
We suspended the rules.
Councilman Tisdale, I'm just asking for the courtesy of discussion then.
Sure. So when we get to that on the agenda, right now, we're going to vote on the amended agenda.
We can't vote on the amended agenda without discussion.
Well, no.
you can't discuss.
That's right. If we remove it prior to discussion, then it can't be discussed.
Well, that would be true of any motion removed, of any item removed from the agenda. Would it not be?
Can you just let him
However-
discuss it before we vote?
However, typically, when the council reads off the amendments, we have discussion at that point. We didn't do that. We skipped that step here. That's all I'm saying. I reserve
What
my
did we do
discussion.
after, what did we do after Mr. Lawrence made the motion to suspend the rules?
He made a motion.
Mr. Barrett made a comment. I made a comment. You made a comment. I can't recall if Mr. Glavin made a comment. Mr. Guines didn't have a comment.
That was on the motion, not the agenda item itself. That was on the motion to suspend the rules, not the the proposed amendment. So he made the motion to suspend the rules. We discussed that. That was the motion to suspend the rules. After the rules are suspended, then he makes a motion to amend the agenda. Then we have discussion on the proposed amendment. That's the part we skipped, is discussion on the proposed amendment. Even though he said why he wanted to suspend the rules, he did say that prior, but he never made the motion to amend the agenda, and we never had that discussion.
That's correct. That's where we are now, approving the amended.
You're jumping to
agenda.
approving instead of discussion. We need to discuss approving.
Well, let's see, I believe everybody had a comment on this except Mr. Guines. Everybody was present for that except Ms. Newman.
No, Mr. Tisdale, they were present for the discussion of suspending the agenda. That's what it was. It was a motion to suspend.
So, thank you. We'll move forward. Is there a motion on the approved, to approve the amended agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, I'll make that second. All in favor of the,
You want to
all,
discuss it? I said, Paul, do you want to discuss it? We'll discuss it.
okay.
There's no problem.
Let's discuss, all right, so we want to discuss it, let's discuss it right now before the vote.
It's like Felix said, everybody should have the right to do that. So-
Mr. Lawrence, you may want to make your point again. Ms. Newman was not here earlier.
It's okay.
My point is very simple. This is a city council for the city of Biloxi. It has nothing to do with a private concern or a private issue that someone's having. We never changed it for any pandemic we went through, and all the places had a lot of problems. This has nothing to do with the city council. It has nothing to do with the city of Biloxi. And if you change this thing, you affect way more people than one person. You affect everybody has to come to the meetings after hours, which anywhere from 25 or 30. You can look around now. That's all overtime money. And I said a minimum of $2,000 a meeting. That's $36,000 you have to pay in overtime money. Somebody got to pay it. But you know, these are the problems you have when you start changing meetings. And the change in the meeting has always been pretty much the same. It's been like that the whole while we all been here. So I mean, changing it for any purpose to benefit one person is just not right. And then you get the issue of who put this on the table? The person that benefits. Can she vote on it? No, she can't. She can't vote on something she's going to benefit from. Any councilman can do that. She can't do that. So you cannot have her vote on an issue that she put in that really pertains only to her business. And that's my biggest problem I have. It's city business, council business, nothing to do with private issues. And that's a private issue and a private business issue. And as you change these things, where do you stop at? We've never changed anything for any councilman ever. Robert Dimon liked to have them at night. We didn't approve that. No, he suggested that. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody wants to do that. You have people who got 4 o'clock meetings, got to pick up their kids, got too many things that affect the public itself. Our job as a council is to protect the city and the public in the city. And this does not do any of those things.
And I concur. Are there any other comments by the council?
I'm just going to say this. I want to reserve I don't know how this is going to go, but I want to reserve it when we come up to the item on the agenda itself. Valid points by both council members, but I think it needs the appropriate discussion. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Glav. Mr. Barrett, anything?
Nothing further.
Mr. Deming, anything?
No, I do have a lot to say, and especially in rebuttal to Mr. Lawrence. However, I would reserve this if we vote to allow this to be discussed as it approaches on the agenda. I'll reserve the majority of my comments, but just a short synopsis. We approve these agendas every year. They're not set in stone by God. We choose what days and what times we're going to set these schedules. We do that for our benefit to make sure that we can all be on the same page. So if we can't benefit from setting a schedule, then why have a schedule? We all benefit from a schedule. We all choose when and where to set these meetings. We do amend it all the time for holidays and for special sessions and for other major things that come on. So we amend this all the time, and we all do it at our benefit, as well as the participation rates of the people. We want to see more people participated. If we're here to represent the people and protect the people and do Biloxi's work, then wouldn't it make more sense to have more people involved? Setting meetings at times when more people can be involved, more people can participate. I don't know if you check your emails, but I received 4 emails this week asking us to move these tonight so they can participate. One person even talked about not being able to go to planning commission meetings with an issue that's on the agenda for tonight because she has to work, and she wished we could do it at night so she could be part of the discussion. So it would help us hear the voice of the people, represent them more adequately, and benefit Biloxi altogether if we did set these meetings a little bit later. Sorry, that was supposed to be short, but I'm a lawyer, and we don't do anything short. I'll reserve the rest for when it comes up on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Deming. Ms. Newman, comments?
The meetings are approved, and this situation came up with my business just recently. That is why I took everything that I could think of to try to solve the issue before coming to you, because I had no idea it would be such a big deal. But the situation has not been resolved. Therefore, I didn't think that it would be a big problem to first offer to move the meetings to 6 p.m., as we already have the first meeting at 6 p.m., and it would be a benefit to the community to be able to visit the meetings if that's what they would like to do. So again, I didn't think it would be that big of a deal. The situation is only going to be for a couple of months. We're in a pandemic. I'm just asking for consideration to a meeting change time. I don't understand what the big deal is. It has nothing to do with the city benefiting me business-wise. It is just a meeting change time. So that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Mr. Guines, anything?
Yeah, I'm for at least letting it just hear it out. Other than that, have no comment other than whether if it make it on the docket, I'm for hearing it out.
Okey-doke, we'll call for the question. All in favor of approving the amended agenda, which would remove item 4B from today's agenda, just raise your hand. All opposed? Thank you. That's a 2-5 vote. All right, all in favor of the agenda now as presented? All right, any opposed? Okay, that's a 7-0 vote for the clerk. Thank you. Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you for being patient. I know you're not a patient man.
Thank you so much for appreciation. It was an interesting, discussion, but would like to give you an update before I pass it on to Mike with some real data. But last week, we visited with the Speaker of the House, the Secretary of State, and the head of MDOT, along with our representative and our city attorney. So we had some interesting discussions on possibilities at the beginning of the executive or beginning of the legislative session. I think it was, it gives us an idea about what we need to do, how fast we need to do things, specifically Pops Ferry extension. And also, before I forget to mention, we talked a little bit about the improvements to A.J. Holloway Park. And so those are the figures and things that we were jumping around, and we've engaged Machado Patano to give us a feasibility study. And we'll probably the next or so meeting, we'll get a detailed study. Again, I think we're looking in both cases about $7 million to do what we need to do. The point of that discussion is that I think now is the time to engage in some debt service so we can provide these products, both the extension by Pops Ferry, and again, if we're successful in ARPA money and some of these other things, we won't need to use that infrastructure money. But we do have some channels of revenue, specifically the use tax for infrastructure. But we're hopeful to get some of those monies. I think the whole project is $12 million. Do we need $12 million left? I thought $13 million on extension.
Yeah. $9.6 million with a $2.5 million match.
Right, but anyway, basically the whole project is, I think within reach. Again, interest rates are going to be turning. So I think within the next, couple of meetings, we'll have a plan. We've asked Jason Thomas and Janie to kind of put a plan together on when we need to pull the trigger. Because I'm afraid that instead of looking at 2, we'll be looking at 2.5. But, these are long-term. We haven't, Mike, holler at me if I'm wrong, but we hadn't touched any significant improvements at A.J. Holloway for about 15 years, I think. But this is a plan to make it a competitive amenity for our kids and as well as attract some business and reduce the ongoing operations and maintenance set. So I think it's timely. I just want to give everybody a heads up. We're looking at probably $7 million or so in Parks and Recreation, as well as that specifically that opportunity there. We may put a little pickleball in there too. So I don't know. It's just something that's needs to be invested in so we can reap some benefits down the road. I think that's all I have. But Mike has some updates. So I'll pass it on to Mike.
First of all, the Pops Ferry Bridge lighting, it's interesting that we got lucky in our best friend at Mississippi Power happens to be in the audience today, Mike Middleton, the senior executive who's been tracking this for us. We've got good news to report. Mississippi Power says that they expect to ship all the new lights, and they're going to be here this month by the 22nd, and that work would commence within 1 to 2 weeks following receipt of the material, and replacement of all of the existing lights would take place in about a week. So this time next month, we should have all new lights on the Pops Ferry Bridge. Been waiting for a while. Appreciate Mississippi Power jumping on that and pushing that project hard. The second one I want to share with you is the Amtrak passenger rail platform. You'll recall that originally Biloxi was going to design and construct a new passenger platform. We had a $250,000 grant with a $250,000 city match, and we were going to design and build the platform. Then Amtrak decided it wanted to design and build the platform, so we backed out of the grant. We turned the grant back over, put our money back in the bank, and have waited and waited. And now after many months, we've now been told that Amtrak's design is complete. They're ready to advertise for construction. In fact, one of the construction companies bidding on that job called me about a permit, so I know that's for real. That's not just for Biloxi, but they're going to bidding out the stations in Bay St. Louis, Gulfport, and Pascagoula. We've asked some questions with regards to disposition of our old platform, and we're getting some answers, but it does now seem right now that Amtrak is on track to have passenger platform done and ready for passenger service by this fall. So there was a long period there we didn't hear a thing, but apparently we've seen the designs, and community development has reviewed them. So we're off and running now on that. Those are my two issues I want to share with you.
Well, thank you, Mike, and I think that concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not aware of any departmental reports. At this time, we'll move to council reports. Mr. Lawrence?
Mike, on the railroad, the train, what they expect us to do? We have to create money ourselves now to build this? We have to build a station?
The city at this time has no money in that. Now, what we may do is some striping and some crosswalks, lighting and such, just to make it easier for passengers to move from the parking lot to the train. But right now, we don't have any money in this deal.
So we're not going to have it built them. We're just going.
They're going to build it for us.
Who's going to build it for us?
Amtrak. Amtrak has something they call a master construction contract, master MACC. Anyway, so they've got a contract with 8 different construction companies that they do all their work with, and they've got the bid out to those guys now. That's one of those who called me. So that there'll be one of Amtrak's contractors who will come in here to build that platform. The one question we've asked and we haven't gotten an answer on is what do we do with the old platform? Is that gonna be demolished as part of this, or is it gonna be upgraded, or is it just gonna sit there like it is? We don't know the answer to that yet. We may have to demo the old platform.
They're not planning on building the building where it was originally?
There's no plan for a station.
That's what I mean. So when you say changing the platform, it's going to be in a different area?
It's going to be directly across, the same site that we proposed all along, directly across from the CTA bus stop. So it's a little bit further to the east of the one, right, a little further east than the old platform.
Okay, so that's that part. I had another call today about they're working on Division Street. I know we widened the Division Street, and the people that live on Division Street want to know if they're going to be parking on Division Street by their houses like it was before.
Right now, we don't plan to have, right now, the way the plans are drawn, there's no parking on Division Street between I-110 and the Keesler Gate. It's a two-lane or a 4-lane divided boulevard. There is one house that we know that has an issue, one, and we're going to try and work that with them. And that's, I'm sure, who called you.
Yeah.
Corner of corner of Porter and Division Street, where they got a very steep driveway.
No, Cass Wood's the one that called me. She lives inside there. And she said, like, if there's no parking and like truck coming to work at the house or anything she has done, where are they gonna park at? That was her question. I mean, stuff like that. It's not so much her parking. It's like anybody comes to our house or any people delivering anything or anybody working on the house, say on the air conditioner or something like that. So where are they supposed to park at? To get to her house. I mean, that was the question. That was the thing. Is they going? She said she measured out
Yep.
the 13 foot left over. She said.
Yeah.
No, she measured it. I don't know. She told me that. So I don't know if there was some spot where somebody could stop and deliver stuff, or stop and see her. So you say there's no parking allowed on Division Street?
That's the way that the road was designed. Now, there is room in front of her house to park a car. So there's like a turning lane that. So we're talking to her. This came up just day before yesterday, after all this time.
Yeah, when they say there's no parking there, I guess they paid attention to that when you live there. Yeah, so that's an issue for those people that live on
Well,
Division.
we've been working around all these little issues. You know the Kasoviches had an issue with a handicap spot that we managed to work around and get that taken care of. So we're trying to work with the residents without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, there are these little onesies and twosies, and I think we can solve her problem. If it's the house on the corner, she obviously faces two different streets.
No, that's not her. That's not
It's the one in the middle.
So, yeah, I mean, they can park on Porter, but that's not the case here. She was talking about the house on Division Street.
Where is she parking now?
Huh? It's not so much where she parks at. It's people that coming over to work on the house that you can't have a truck. I don't know where they're going. She wants to know where they're going to park at. Where can they park the trucks at if she starts to have something done to her house? That's her question. She can park in the yard. It's her deal if somebody coming over or anybody where they supposed to park at.
Well,
That's why I brought this up at this meeting, so you
Well,
can tell me what's happening.
We have met with her, and I know the BMA, the architectural engineering firm that's managing that job, has met with her, and they're talking to her about options. We're going to take care of it.
All right. Well, I'll just bring that back then.
This is not the place and time.
Right now.
So, just get the questions answered. And the J.W. Cook called, we took care of that driveway at Cook's, the junkyard in Woolmarket. Fixed the one side with the rocks and everything. And they were supposed to do the other side. They've never done the other side. Are they still planning on doing that?
I'm not aware of
Where
that.
the driveway, they drive over and they have the cover underneath and they put the rocks and everything on one side and
On the
seal it
north
all
or the
up.
south side?
Right.
Which side? The north or the
Where
south
he
side?
drives in, right. One side is done, the other side is not done.
All right, we'll
So
check it out,
here's
there. Nathan.
Talking about Walmart?
Yeah, we'll check it out Thursday.
That's Ward 7, as I recall.
Well, we started this a long time ago. They called me, so I told you this before, and you fixed half of it. So no, Nathan, didn't have talked to that. Now, you just said you'd handle it.
We'll look at it.
So they called me.
I'm not aware of the
They
problem.
called me this week.
Cooks. On Cooks on the
Cook
old
Hill.
marker. Yeah, no side, that's why they asked north side or south side.
One side's done with the rocks and everything. The other side's never been done.
Which one is it? Did they tell you which side?
Yeah, well, I
The
got
north or the
pictures.
south? We'll look at it. I mean, we'll look
I
at
got
it.
pictures
on
of it.
Thursday. We're a few blocks from here every Thursday morning.
Yeah. And another one, Eric Nolan, did y'all cut the tree down on Oak Lawn that's hanging in the middle of the street? Yes, that was done last week. Okay, just want to make sure that, the fire department took care of, they handled that for a while. So I just got to make sure to get this done. Because that was a bad thing, can't have emergency vehicles being hit by trees. And even Felix was tall enough to touch this tree, it was that low in the street. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Guines, anything?
Yes, thank you. Couple of things. Last week, I was privileged to go up to MML conference, to go up there and, of course, with the mayor's permission, I became on Toby Barker's board staff. Yeah, I'm one of his board members. And I believe this is one of the best in-the-mail meetings that I had a chance to participate in. The governor came in, and just like the mayor went a week prior, the governor came in, the lieutenant governor, and there's a lot of funding out there. And if we don't know, we have about $4 billion to start reaching from. And in this meeting, and I know you went the week prior, but what I did is I took the privilege, myself and one of the consultants that we have, that we approved during the budgeting process, went and identified each and every source of funding that they have available. And of course, we have a short time period to get it in. You know, we have a lot of, for the purpose of assessing our current comprehensive plan and different things that we have within the city. So I'll be getting with Peter later on to get some more of those numbers so we can go ahead and start wrapping it up so we can get that in. There are like 14, 15 different sources of funding. And of course, I know our bridge is one of our main concerns in our community. We want to identify, we've identified the potential funding sources that are there. And also what we want to do in the next week or two is start identifying our partners, so that there are a lot of things that need to be done in our community. And of course, with the information that they gave us, it was beneficial to us. So I look forward to getting an email to you guys to lay out the whole, everything that I've learned. And I know that sharing the information is good, where we can kind of put this all together so we can go out there and grab it, because as the lieutenant governor said, this is a once in a lifetime or once in a political lifetime opportunity that we have as a city. The other thing I have is I want to thank Mr. Creel. We had a little issue last week, and I just want to thank him, because a lot of times when issues come up, we have a system in place, and sometimes we tend to fight against the grain. And of course, Mr. Creel, he didn't have to, but he accepted all responsibilities. But we do know things go up and they go down, and there's a pecking order. And so I appreciate when people stand up and say, the buck stops here. So I just want to, and we know the situation, I just want to say thank you for accepting that and putting things back at ease the way they should be. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Guines. Ms. Newman? Mr. Deming?
Mr. Mayor, we talked earlier about some of the roads and some of the park issues. One thing I forgot to mention was lights in front of Sunkist Country Club, the little crosswalk area. There are no lights there, and some people riding golf carts back and forth. I've had some calls about some residents in Sunkist concerned about almost hitting people and not being able to see them as they come around the corner at nighttime. So I think they've called and spoke with the girls at the power company already and just said we need to get a work order sent over from the city. So if that's something you're inclined to approve, I would like to get that work
I
order
think we
sent
had
over.
some communications from Jim Compton as far as some of the work was done out in Sunkist, and that was mentioned, so that's on our radar, and we'll
Okay.
figure out what we need to do for lighting Sunkist Country Club Road.
Oh, okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deming. Mr. Glavin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Middleton with Mississippi Power. He was instrumental in the storms and hurricanes that we experienced this past season, and the coordination and professional care you exhibited certainly was noticed. We're lucky to have you, and hopefully we don't have too many bad storms going forward, but it's good to know that you're at the helm. Also, like to keep on the radar the 800 block of Brentwood. Still has a sinkhole, a major sinkhole. I think Public Works has been notified, but I just don't want that to slip through the cracks. And on the agenda today, there's a resolution for Campbell Drive for some manhole covers There's still some additional work to be done to alleviate, I think we diverted some stormwater, and it's causing some problems there. And hopefully we can remedy that soon. And with the remainder of my time, I'd like to ask Mr. Corse. He has some issues in front of his house, and his neighbors are experiencing some issues. Mr. Corse, if you come up, and you have the remainder of my time, sir, to talk about the drainage issues that you're dealing with.
Mr. Corse, if you would, just sign in and just state your name in full so the clerk can get that down in the minutes. Thank you.
Council. I'm Andre Corse. I live off of Tribe Drive in Biloxi. My neighbor's name is Danny Busick. He's not able to be here today. He suffered a stroke a month back. We have some flood issues or water issues that we're dealing with from Lagniappe apartment complex. We're getting our surface drain off from that parking area and into our yards. It's a substantial amount of water, which has eroded a great portion of the ditches that's in the front of the home. And we just want to see if someone could work on getting some sort of plan or work with the apartment complex where we wouldn't take on that surface water from their parking. They put a retention pond on the back area of their property, which is reaching the pond. It's not going off into a reserve, and it's breaching the pond and it's flooding into our yards. I own a construction business. I help build, assist other companies build the Ocean Club condominiums, Beau Rivage, several other big projects on the coast, the port, and I understand what the problems are, but I don't want to go and intervene and cause a fuss, but I want to bring it to you, Mr. Glavin, and to the council to see if y'all could rectify the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Corse. I just think it's relevant for you to give your take on it. And I've been out to Mr. Corse's property, Mayor. I've been out to Mr. Corse's property, and it literally, you need boots to walk through his yard. And in years past, you didn't have, it was dry, high and dry there. So we'll try to get you some help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corse.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Glavin. Mr. Barrett?
Yes, I've had a couple of calls on Parker's Creek boat launch. If we could possibly get it on the list for dredging projects, it's filling back in. I know we did that like 7-8 years ago, something like that. It was done, but it's filling back in from all the stuff, I guess, projects and stuff coming down through Parker Creek, and it's ending right there and filling that in. And then just whenever you have an opportunity, if I can get an update, Mr. Leonard, on where we're at on Oak Lawn, the curve, where we have the sinkhole that we keep having to fill in right there south of the fire station. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett, and I have no report. That brings us to the public agenda. We'll set aside up to 45 minutes for citizen comments. Each speaker will be permitted 3 minutes. When you're recognized, if there are any speakers, just come to the table, sign in, state your name for the council clerk so she can record it accurately in the minutes, and then we'll be off to the races. Is anybody on my right, your left? Anybody on my left, your right? Anybody in the back? Last call. Thank you. That brings us to the policy agenda. If the clerk would read, this is a second reading. If the clerk would read 4A, please.
Ordinance to approve a zoning map amendment for the property located at 153, 161 Pond Grove, and 2465 Denman Place for a change in district classification from RS10 low-density single-family residential to RM20 medium-density multifamily residential.
I made the motion, Mr. Lawrence has seconded that, and I have concerns about this. Basically, there are three parcels, and well, I'll let Mr. Creel. Thank you, Chair. If you give us a brief description and maybe what some of the concerns are. Thank you.
Okay. The property is currently zoned RS10, which is residential single family. There are some apartments built on the property that have been there for years that are grandfathered in. The way this came to our attention was that the code enforcement officer saw them trying to add on to one of the buildings that faces Pine Grove. Now, with a grandfathered in situation, you're not allowed to extend or expand a structure unless the property is brought into compliance with whatever the violation is. So in this case, they had to ask for a zoning change to multifamily in order to be able to add on to the building. What they originally had asked for was M10, which is residential multifamily, but the problem with that is that they don't have enough land to accommodate the 9 units that they have on the property. In order for them to be brought into compliance, the least zoning that they could ask for is RM20. So that was made clear at the Planning Commission meeting that they would need to ask for RM20 in order to be brought into compliance, in order to be able to expand the building that's already there. The Planning Commission voted to approve the RM20 zoning. Now, the concern with some of the neighbors and with the Planning Commission is that if they got to RM20, that they would come back and ask for short-term rental for conditional use. But the owner of the property stepped up and on more than one time said, I have absolutely no interest in doing short-term rental there. I'm not going to be coming back and ask for short-term rental later. All I want to do is to add on to this building, which is what they're adding on as a storage unit. So that's where we are today.
Thank you, Mr. Creel. This is in the Briarfield subdivision. I kind of blew up a big map for you there. I've indicated, if you'll look, you'll see the 3 properties we're talking about, and adjacent to 2465 Deming Place is 2461. It's already zoned RM30 right here. So the lady in question, the owner, owns all 4 of these parcels. Mm-hmm. And what she wants to do is consolidate them all as RM30 with repeated assurances that she will not put short-term rentals there, which is the neighborhood's concern. And as I recall, you'll notice that 3 of those properties, the ones that she's asking to be rezoned RM30, are currently RS10.
That's correct.
And there's on the large RS10 parcel, 153 Pine Grove, there's a 4-plex there.
That's right.
And there's evidence online that she has advertised that as short-term rentals in the past. And RS10 is there's a 3-plex apartment units there, and then there's a single residential, small residential, I guess it would be a cottage or something, a house at that location, and there's one also at 2461, which is not being rezoned, but that's the other parcel that she owns with a small single-family residence.
And the one house that's there is a duplex, so there's 2 units in there.
Gotcha. And the neighbors, I believe, are concerned about the short-term rentals because she has at various times had tenants there on a short-term rental basis and has advertised on Airbnb several times. I want to say twice in 2021 and 3 or 4 times in 2019 and 2018, even though she's never had a permit. So the neighbors are reluctant to take at face value take it at face value when she says she has no intention of putting a short-term rental there. I would point out in the transcript at this particular Planning Commission meeting on this item that Mr. Creel noted that in the future, if you have structures such as these, for example, that at some point in the future, maybe this current owner years from now or a new property owner decides, since these are RM30, ask for a conditional use for short-term rentals, and the recommendation from the staff would be to the Planning Commission that they not be approved unless basically they rewire all those structures in order to have commercial electrical conduit or infrastructure in place, not because it's wired differently than it is for residential.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Did I state that correctly?
That's correct. The issue is that when you convert an apartment complex, or in this case, a fourplex, whatever, over to short-term rental, the structure for that use does not meet the building code or the fire code. So the fire chief and I have discussed this, and we would recommend to you that unless the owner that's wanting to transfer it agrees to go back and completely gut the place and bring it up to the standards of the fire code and the building code, that we would not recommend approval.
But someone could still, in the future, this particular owner or a future owner might still come before the Planning Commission, ask for a conditional use for short-term rentals. It would be heard. The Planning Commission might vote against it, but it would still come to the council, and the council's not bound by that recommendation, so the possibility still exists that they could, in fact, those structures be flipped to short-term rentals.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay, the reason I blew up this map, and y'all don't have this, but my colleagues do up here, is Briarfield is, just to give you just a very brief history, Briarfield is a subdivision that was established, as I recall, before Western Biloxi was annexed.
That's correct.
And when you look at the Briarfield subdivision, you have a lot of different zonings. Along the beach, you've got community business, commercial, then you've got RM30 along Briarfield on one side. On the other side, you've got RM30 for half of that, and then once it hits Deming Place, you see that it's RS5, residential single family. Everything on Pine Grove is residential single family on both sides of the street currently. So, having said that, I will just conclude my comments at this point by saying I'm not in favor of rezoning this to RM30. If it's denied, the current zoning remains as it is, and it's grandfathered in based on the non-conforming structures currently on the locations.
That's correct. And the owner would have to demolish the addition that they were building without a permit.
Which is at the back of the fourplex, I believe.
No, sir, it's at the back of the two-story building.
That's
Yes, sir.
That's the fourplex on the big lot there. Okay, that concludes my comments for the moment. Mr. Lawrence, any comments?
So you suggesting that we deny this?
I am suggesting that we would not approve this as presented. That's correct. Now, the motion I made was to approve it for discussion purposes, and you had seconded that at the first reading, so here we are. So I'm not in favor of approving this zoning change, is my position. Mr. Lawrence?
Agree with you. It sounded like to me that she did something and got caught. She was running short-term rentals in there. And y'all found out she was adding on to these buildings for what purpose?
I'm sorry, Mr.
You
Lawrence.
said, didn't you say the inspector caught her adding on to these buildings?
Yes, sir. The code enforcement officer saw an addition going up without a permit, and that's what drew it to the attention. Well, she came in to get a permit after they had started it. But see, we can't issue a permit to extend or expand a non-conforming use. So the first step was she had to bring the zoning into compliance with what she's doing there. And the lowest zoning that would accomplish what she's trying to do is the RM20.
So each one of these is single houses?
No, sir. One of them actually looks like an apartment building, and then there's a one-story threeplex, and then there's another one that looks like a single-family house, but it's actually a duplex. She has 9 units in all right now on these properties.
But you can't use short-term rentals
No, sir.
right now? So this all for the purpose of turning it to short-term rentals.
Well, Frederick is very aware, the code officer we have assigned to short-term rental, he's very aware of that these neighbors have complained that they might try to do short-term rentals, so this is one of the ones that he's checking on.
Yeah, but once you change this, then she can come back with short-term rentals.
Well, she could come in and ask the planning commission and the council for a conditional use, but you have the right to deny that.
Because when they know I got caught, forgive me, let me do what I want to do anyway. So I back Paul, I can't support that at all.
Thank you. Any comments, Mr. Guines? Ms. Newman, any comments?
Yeah, I'm a little confused because I heard from a resident saying that this particular lady had several homes and she already had some that were long-term and she had some renters that were having guns out in the yard, but since she turned some into short-term rentals, that neighborhood has changed around, so they didn't understand why these women were against the short-term rental. But she doesn't have any short-term rental right now?
No, she came in a few years ago and asked for short-term rental in the apartment buildings, and that was denied. And so what's
That's why I'm
happened
so
now is that
confused.
she's not asking for short-term rental right now. All she's asking to do is to bring the zoning into compliance with the uses that are already on the property.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Deming, any comments?
Yeah, so the planning commission voted to approve this. What the contention is that we're afraid that she's gonna come back and ask us to allow her to do short-term rentals, right? I find that to deny it on that basis is illogical. The purpose that she's using this is to come into compliance for projects she's doing that would conform with the purpose, not including short-term rentals, right?
That's correct, yes, sir.
So she's got something started and she's come to get a zoning.
She has a grandfathered in use, and she's asking for the zoning so that she would no longer be a grandfathered in use. She would be legal in the sense that her zoning and her use matches up.
And what exactly is she attempting to do right now? What was the permit for that she didn't pull?
It was to add an addition for storage to the back of one of the existing buildings.
Okay, and the way to get this done is to approve this.
Yes.
And the way to prevent the demon of short-term rental is simply to deny the request if it comes in.
That's correct.
This whole thing, okay, thank you.
Mr. Glavin? No comment. Mr. Barrett? So and I have additional comments. So if you look at 153 Pine Grove, that's the big lot. That's where the fourplex is. It's two-story. If you look on the corner at 161 Deming Place, that's a threeplex, single-story. And then at 2465 Deming, did you say that's a single-story duplex?
It's a duplex, yes, sir.
All right, so that's a duplex. And then again, she owns also, and she's not asking that this be zoned RM30 because it's already zoned RM30. She also owns the property at 2461 Deming Place. The reason I gave you this illustration and pointed out, and I'll point it out again, everything's residential on Pine Grove Avenue. That changes if you approve residential multifamily for those three parcels. Now, I will point out again that, the neighbors are quite fearful of short-term rentals. They have concerns. You may recall that this council approved on Briarfield earlier a new apartment complex. Was that 36 units, I believe? 30 or 36 units, 4 stories,
Yes, sir.
as I recall. And that at the last minute, that was a conditional use was requested and granted. And at the time, I recall that we thought it was going to be for 4 of those apartments, specific apartments, but apparently the way the resolution was read, the attorney said, nope, when you approved them, that's for all those units. So they already have 36 units right there, short-term rentals.
That's correct.
Okay, in the red, the bottom right corner, you've got that community business. That's an RV park in the last 3 years. So, folks here are very concerned about who's in their neighborhood, short-term rentals, people come and go. The other thing is, just based on my experience with the neighbors, and since it's in my ward, checking on these periodically, particularly during special events like spring break or cruising the coast. There was an incident, I can't remember how long ago, and it was mentioned in the Planning Commission in the transcript, that you had a motorcycle gang or a group of motorcyclists that rented the fourplex and just had a terrific time in the neighborhood, accelerating up and down the street. That bothers folks, the neighbors. The other thing is that this property owner has never had a permit for short-term rentals. Okay? And I don't know if she's ever been cited for short-term rentals.
I can't say for sure. I believe she has been cited before.
Right.
But I'll follow up on that and get you an answer back.
And I think I'm correct, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I believe that's why the neighbors cast a suspicious glance upon her claims that I'm not going to put short-term rentals there in the future. Not going to do it. Again, I saw evidence online for, I think it was Airbnb. She was advertising in December of last year. Anyway, that being said, those are the concerns. Sure. Mr. Damon, a response.
Thank you. Councilman Tisdale, I just want to recall that the statement you made that she's done short-term rentals without getting a permit for it, not giving her a storage unit isn't going to prevent someone from doing short-term rentals without a permit. I think that we need to monitor that situation more. What we're doing now is refusing to bring these parcels into compliance with updated coding and refusing her to have a storage unit because we're afraid to tell her no for something she has to ask us to do in the future because she may have done it wrongfully in the past, that now if we don't give her a storage unit, somehow she will never wrongfully do it again. The whole thing is illogical. The Planning Commission voted to approve it.
Yeah, I don't think that was my claim, but continue.
You have RM30, the back of this thing butts up to RM30s. And I'm not passionate about this because it's on Deming Place. There's no relation. I just find that our logic for denying something the Planning Commission votes to approve is illogical. I think that if we really are rational about this, we do what the Planning Commission approved, bring it up to code, allow this person to have this storage unit, and monitor the fact of whether they're illegally or legally operating activity on the property as per the law. That's what we should be doing, not denying a reclassification of property because we're afraid that she might ask us to do something we can otherwise tell her no to do anyway. I'm done.
Mr. Lawrence.
How come we can't just approve that she can build a storage shed?
Because it would be a violation of the land development ordinance to do that. It's single-family zoning. Again, she's grandfathered in right now with the use that she has. She can continue that grandfathered in use from now on as long as she doesn't change it. But once you want to extend or expand a non-conforming use, you have to bring the zoning into compliance with what your use is there on the property.
So nobody can build a storage unit unless they are RM20s?
It depends on the use and whether or not it's grandfathered in or not. If this was a use by right, there'd be no problem with her getting a storage shed, but the fact that she's grandfathered in, the language is clear that you just can't add on to it until your zoning is correct.
She's adding on to a building, or she just building a freestanding storage unit?
No, she added on to the building.
So you have to change the zone so she can finish out the storage shed?
Yes, sir.
That don't make sense to me at all. I mean, how is that written in the law that she can't do that?
That's standard language in any city's law, that when something's grandfathered in, you grandfather it in the way that it was brought in. We have to do this a lot with the properties that came in through annexation, that their zoning and the use on the property may not match up. We have to accept them, though, when we annex them in as they are. But if they come in and want to extend or expand them, then they would have to come ask you for a zoning change before we could issue them a permit to add on.
She can't add a room on this property?
Not without the zoning being right. And see, if she had just a little bit more land, we could have downgraded this request to an RM10, but because she's got 9 units there, her .78 acres is not enough. That only justifies 7 units. If she had a full acre, we could do it to RM10, and then there would be no need for worrying about short-term rental because it's not allowed in RM10. But if you downgrade it now, should still be in violation, and she still would not be able to add on.
Which one of these pieces of property or house that she's building on this lot?
The large one.
Huh?
The larger one of the 3.
And so why we have to change the other 2? You talking about total land?
Well, because she owns all 3 of them, she's just asking for all the zoning on her land to be brought in because she's got multifamily units on those too.
And we got some crazy laws, I'll tell you that.
Anything else, Mr. Lawrence?
No, that's it. I mean,
Okay, couple of,
I can see the neighbors being concerned, though.
couple of,
Ain't no doubt about that part. You know it's coming next.
Mr. Creel, short-term rentals are they are prohibited in residential areas, correct?
Single family, yes, sir.
Single family.
Single family and RM10.
Right, and that's what we have right now in these 3 properties. They're single-family residential.
That's correct.
Okay. The only reason this comes up at this time is under what may be a pretense or not, is that the owner wants a zone change so that her property, all 4 parcels, are RM30, like the one that she currently owns that is zoned RM30.
RM30, but remember that the Planning Commission downgraded that request to RM20.
To RM20, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, if, since they are not permitted in single-family residential, which is what these are currently zoned, you need a zone change to RM30 or RM20, and you can request a zone change, and that's what this property owner is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I can request a conditional use. Now, the fact that it's in a residential area, because we had a slightly different case a number of months ago that came before the council. It was in Ward 7. I can't remember how large the property was. It was in the middle of a residential area.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner, new owner, wanted it rezoned, and it was rezoned, I think, RM20, if you know what I'm speaking of.
Sure. That was the property that was owned
Right,
by...
and as I recall, I may be wrong, but didn't the Planning Commission deny that? Do you recall?
You figure she had all this stuff.
I don't recall. I actually thought they approved it. Yeah.
He actually originally applied for the incorrect zoning for what he was asking to do.
Yes.
And so when he went before the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to change it to what the correct zoning was. And then we voted on, similar to this, the correct zoning, because he applied for the wrong thing.
That's correct. That's what happened. Yeah.
My point being that this was a residential area, and in the middle, I think the surrounding properties were all residential. Correct. Was that in the middle of all these residentially zoned properties, you had a property owner that said, I'd like it rezoned, which he did, then I think asked for a conditional use, and now it can be used as a short-term rental, is correct?
That one can, yes, sir.
And I think one of my colleagues up here, when I said, well, that means you could do the same thing in Sunkist. That would never happen. Of course, that would never happen. Yet here we have a similar instance in the middle of a residential area The first step is to ask for an RM 20 or 30. Once I get that, I'd like to put a short-term rental. Could be the next month, could be years from now. But anyway, so never think that just because it's in a residential area, or even whatever the planning commission's recommendation would be, the buck still stops with the council in terms of approving these or so forth. So anyway, I just want to comment on that, and having said that, I'm ready to call for the question unless there are additional comments. Okay, with that, I'll call for the question. All in favor of rezoning as presented in this ordinance? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All opposed? Okay, it's approved on a 5-2 vote. Thank you. That brings us to item B. If the clerk would read item B, please.
Resolution to change the city council meeting schedule for the months of February, March, April, and May of 2022.
I'll move it for discussion.
Beg your pardon?
I said I move it for discussion.
All right, there's a motion to discuss by Mr. Lawrence,
That's what everybody wants to do, so we get the discussion.
a second by Mr. Barrett. Okay, Mr. Lawrence.
I have to apologize, when y'all wanted to discuss this earlier, I should have withdrew my motion and let it be discussed. I had no problem with doing that. So I apologize for not just removing it from the beginning, so we can all speak our piece. So that was a mistake on my part. I go back to the same thing I've said from the beginning. This is more of a private concern with a business than it is with set meetings. And yes, we do set all the meetings, and yet we do set the times. And I've been here a long time, just like y'all have been here now, and nobody ever suggested 4 o'clock meeting, ever. Nobody even discussed having any meetings at 4 o'clock, period. And all the time we set these times, it's always been the 1:30 and 6 o'clock. Nobody's ever brought 4 o'clock in to bring more people in, 4 o'clock to do this, nothing. It's never been a great time. You have no council meetings, you have no planning commission meetings at 4 o'clock. So that's a major problem. No, it's not gonna bring more people. You probably lose people that couldn't come. You never set the planning commission at a 4 o'clock meeting. Hell, most people getting off work, picking up their kids, picking up their grandkids, living their life at that time. That's a tough time. That was one of the reasons it was always set at 1:30. People had the opportunity to make that. And we always did 6 o'clock meeting to make sure anybody could come at night. So I don't want to hear that we should be setting this because it really makes a lot of help for the public. It does not. This has never been
Let me
suggested.
correct you, though. I first
Never been
asked for 6
suggested
p.m.
Before, never. You never brought it up before. So, I mean, don't bring that up now, that all of a sudden 4 o'clock is the greatest time. That's the worst time in the world to have a meeting, period. Okay, now go back to the same thing. This is not a council decision. This is a private concern decision. There's nothing to do with the council or our meeting, anything. And to change 18 meeting for one person, when you affect 20, 25, you got 18, 19 employees here right now. And it affect them and affect overtime. Is the city willing to pay $36,000 or more for overtime pay? Because we have to change these meetings? No, I don't think so. Who's going to put up the 36, 40,000, whatever it takes for those meetings? Because you know, our meetings don't last an hour when they're over with. We'll be running an hour, hour and a half past that. It's possible. So that will be costing extra money for the city, all to relate to one person. It's not the right thing to do for the city. When we have a business, you take care of your business inside your business, period. There's nothing to do with us at this council. You have a business problem, then you need to handle it inside your business. That is not for the council to vote on this. Otherwise, we'll be voting pandemic people, employees all over the place. It's not a good thing. And everybody here accepted the times. We just went through all the changes in the time and the changes in the meetings, and we pretty much all voted the same. A couple of things like they say, when you change them because it affects the city, or period. It don't go to a private business. We never changed anything for a private business. And yes, I do believe that in this case, the Dixie brought this up, that she cannot vote on this. This only benefits her in this case. So those are the main reasons I have. Those are the problem. I would call that a conflicts of interest. You know, that's up to y'all what you want to call it. But those are some of the major problems I have with it. Not city business, it's not council business. It's a private business issue. And we should not be even discussing this, to me. But no, we want to have a discussion, so that's fine. We're having a discussion, and everybody can voice their opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Barrett?
I've already stated, I'm good.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Newman?
I'm not going to beat a dead horse about this, but I did initially ask for 6 p.m., just like the first meeting's at 6 p.m. I did not get any votes other than dimming for that, so then I asked for 4 p.m., which 4 p.m. is not overtime. If you would just shut your mouth, we would get out of here on time, so it would not be on overtime at 4 p.m. Thank you.
Mr. Glavin?
Yeah, listen, you know, Councilwoman Newman works hard. Her coffee shop has some wonderful coffee there and creating good experiences, and, you know, that's to be admired. She did ask, you know, would there be some consideration of changing the meetings? And at first, changing all the meetings at 6 o'clock and doing it indefinitely really wasn't appealing to me. She asked for a 4 p.m. To allow her to take care of her business. I'd like, for consideration, maybe we do it on a shorter time frame, a couple of months, and then if it all works out, you know, come back and see if we can extend that. But since I had that discussion with Councilwoman Newman, there's others that have questioned what kind of burden it would put on them to facilitate these meetings, to support our meetings, and so forth. And so I think there should be some kind of compromise. I know the optics may not look good for some people, but we definitely want to be doing the right thing. We're here to serve, you know, in our capacity, and that's all we're trying to do. So I would support this maybe in an amended version of a couple of months. I know Councilman Deming said he has some thoughts, and I'd like to hear the other proposals before we reach a final vote. Thank you.
Clarify, Mr. Glavin, we're talking about February, March, and April, and May, and that's 2 days a month.
Mr. Deming?
I think what she was saying by that is she wanted to just clarify, she feels that it is a couple months. If you want to cut it in half, I think that's a great start to finding a solution to meet in the middle. Just to refresh your memory, you're great. You remember a lot of things, and you impress me a lot, George, with your memory. But this has been brought up before, not 4 o'clock, you're right. But I did propose that we did meetings at 6 o'clock because a lot of the other cities do them at 6 o'clock. And they're very successful, they're well attended. Keep in mind, you also stated improperly that these have always been at these times, and they haven't. They used to be at 1:30, and then we added a night meeting the first week of everything. So we have amended this, we have adjusted this, we have made changes to it for whatever purpose it is. And if we can't vote on this because it benefits us, everything we do as residents of the city of Biloxi benefit us. We're here to do things for the city of Biloxi. But more importantly, the majority of us are professionals, and this would benefit me especially, so I should be restricted from voting on it in your logic, because I could spend more time in my office, more time in the courtrooms, more time doing other things. It would benefit me. However, I think it's a good idea to go to the night meetings for other purposes. And she's right, it's 2 days a month. So we're talking about 4 days if we do it 2 months, as Councilor Glavin suggested he may be open to. That would be 4 days. I don't know where your numbers come from for the total overtime, but if you look at who's working right now, one, we have a majority of people that are on salary. So, and just to state the obvious, but also everybody could be more productive if they were in their offices. I like more productivity for my employees, and if everybody's in their office working, it's a benefit to the city of Biloxi. Sometimes it costs money to get a benefit, and from an actuarial standpoint, at the end of the day, we'll get more bang for our buck because people will be working at this period and not spending an entire workday in this room listening to us blow off hot air. I don't think I'm going to go through the rest of this. I think it's pretty obvious you're either for it or against it. I think 6 o'clock meetings benefit the city. I think it's a great idea to do. That's why I proposed it years ago. However, if you're not inclined to agree, that's up to you, but I think it's a good idea to do, and I think it's a great idea to try it on a trial basis like Mr. Glavin suggests. I'll conclude my thoughts.
Okay, I guess what bothers me, is not Mr. Guines. Mr. Guines does not bother me. Go ahead, Felix.
I was wondering if I was going to get an opportunity. Thank you for recognizing me. Looking at this, I was listening to all the comments, and Mr. Glavin had probably the most sense of what I hear. Of course, my version would be a little bit more modified than that. I'm looking at maybe a 2-month time frame in his standard write-up right now. I'm not, I can't go forward in its standard write-up. However, I do believe 6 o'clock is more appropriate. And I believe flipping it. Right now, we have 1 6 p.m. meeting and 2 1:30s. And if we can flip it around to maybe 2 night meetings and 1 in the day. And the reason I ask for that 1 in the day, because sometimes it forces us to interact with the administration. Because this time, if we eliminate all of them, then at some point, we would never get a chance to interact. We need to see that mayor, we need to see some of the administrators, the directors to have that continuity. Because I've had an issue this past 2 weeks that come up that forces me to talk to these directors to find out what's going on. So if I had to make a proposal, a temporary proposal, it would be to flip it to 6 o'clock. 4 o'clock is, I believe it's kind of inconvenient, but 6 o'clock and one day out of the group in the 1:30, and then flip the other 2 back to 6. And that would be my proposal if I had to add any comments to it. Thank you.
You would say 6 o'clock, 1:30, and 6 o'clock meeting? No,
Yeah.
what are you saying?
The only thing I'm saying is 2 out of the 3, we can do it on a trial basis, because like I said, again, my reasoning behind it is because I don't get to see the chief all the time. I don't get to see the mayor all the time. So at least once a month, I will be able to get to see them. Sometimes it could cause us not to interact with each other if we get too busy and we forget about it. This will force us to interact if we had some kind of issue we need to deal with. So I've spoke to Ms. Newman about it when she first initiated it, and I said my piece on that. But the 2 night meetings, I mean, that's a great compromise, I thought. But that's where I'm at on it. Thank you.
My question, a couple of things, like Dixon said, the meeting starts at 4.
Your thing on?
Okay.
Hello?
Okay, you're good. You're good.
Hello.
You're good.
The meeting started at 4, but the meetings last more than an hour. Once you break 5 o'clock, it's overtime. We're not gonna run 4 to 5 meetings every time. It ain't gonna happen. That's impossible. So that's where the overtime comes from. And the numbers I came with, Robert, it was 18 meetings, and I just roughly about 2,000 a meeting, is where I got the 36,000 from. If you had that many people being affected by everything, you could probably go to Linden and ask him how much does it cost us on the first meeting of the month to find out the closer numbers, and just times it by 18. So that's where I got that from. I didn't make it up. I just decided that it'd be roughly running that much money for overtime. Okay, so that's where the 36,000 came from.
Okay, if you read the resolution, it's only 8 meetings that change total, so it's only 8 meetings, not 18.
It's 2 a month. How many?
It's 2 a month for 4 months.
How many?
It's
How many
only 4 months. It's only 4 months. On the proposed amendment, or the proposed resolution is only 4
4 times 2
months.
is 8.
Yeah, so it's just 8.
It's not counting this. When would this go into effect? Say again? February. And you still want all the months?
The resolution is written for just 4 months, just February, March, April, and May. That's it. And so it's 2 meetings per month. So that'd be 8 total meetings that she's proposing that we amend or change.
And in these meetings, we setting the change, because you said you had a issue inside your business. Why don't you just give this person that day off? And we don't have to change anything. No, I'm just saying. I mean, one person taking off and changing everything. Well, I mean, that makes sense. See, the two.
Okay. Ms. Newman, I have a question. What's driving this resolution, if you would? Just kind of give an explanation of why this resolution is presented at this time and why it says what it says.
I have a very small business, okay? It takes a lot of training involved. We're in a pandemic. All this time, I have been able to overcome the issues of having a hard time finding employees, okay? I have a girl who she's fantastic. I can rely on her and walk away and everything is going to be fine, but she now has a class from 2 to 4 on the same day for these months, okay? I have tried everything. I've tried to find employees. I've tried to train the ones that I have to take the spots. Nothing has come about. So like I said, I love my job. I love my business. I would like to still be able to do both. And all I'm asking is for a time change temporarily so that we can continue on as business as usual. Thank you.
Okay. And I think Mr. Lawrence's point, I believe, is because we have a change in schedule for one of your employees. Now, we're going to change the council meeting times, basically.
Can we just vote?
Anyway, okay, I just wanted to make that point. Okay. We'll call, Mr. Deming, I think, wanted to.
All right, I want to move to amend the resolution. So my motion to amend would be to strike the last 2 months, so we'll do this for just 2 months instead of 4 months. And give it a trial run that way. The other amendment would be to change the 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., as Mr. Gines suggested.
So as Mr. Guines suggested, he suggested 2, 6 o'clock, and 1:30. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I suggested. That's what I will feel comfortable with, because
I'm just
as I
trying,
stated before, I still think we need that interaction in the daytime with the administrators, directors, and what have you. That's my purpose for it. I mean, that's on the real tip.
Okay, so what we're going to do, what my amendment is to, in the line that says, whereas for the month of March, strike March 15th, and amend the 4 p.m. after March 22nd to 6 p.m. Then it would also be to strike February 15th after, whereas for the month of February, and amend the 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the paragraph of February. Then strike the paragraph for April and strike the paragraph for May.
So just so she understands, so the first 2 meetings, you're proposing 6 p.m. and the last one 4?
No, it would be one up, one down, one up. So it would be first meeting at 6, second meeting at 1:30, third meeting at 6.
Okay.
I can support that.
I didn't quite, the last part, the 3 meetings a month we're gonna have for these couple months are gonna be when?
Yeah.
We're just going to change the last meeting of the month to a night meeting also. That's it. So the next
6
two
o'clock.
last meetings of the month will be at 6 o'clock.
We have a first meeting at 6 and the last meeting at 6.
Correct.
One of them at 1:30.
Correct.
And you're gonna do this for 2 months?
Yes, sir.
And in
Just
2 months, we revert back to where we were?
unless we continue to go forward this way.
Continue.
Correct.
Yes.
This will expire after March.
Just give everybody a chance to.
That's a motion?
So,
Was a motion.
so let me state this.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm sure I understand. Basically, we're amending this so that we would have 2 meetings per month at 6 o'clock and one at 1:30.
Correct.
The first meeting of the month would remain at 6 o'clock. The second meeting of the month would be 1:30.
It remains.
And the third meeting of the month would be 6 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Carrie, you got that? All right, so that's the amendment that Mr. Deming has offered. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Mr. Guines, any discussion? All in favor of the amendment? Okay. That's a 7-0 on the amended. Now we'll vote on the amended resolution.
Is there any discussion, or are we just voting?
We'll have some discussion. I don't know if we can discuss anymore. If anybody has anything to say. Basically, what we're doing is adopting the resolution as amended, which is what we just stated. Everybody's
Absolutely.
clear on that. 2 months, first and third meeting of the month at 6 o'clock, second meeting, 1:30.
Yes.
I just had a comment for the mayor. Can we change that lodge meeting a little bit, about 30 minutes? I have a hard time getting there, Mayor. I know, but I have a hard time.
All right, we'll call for the question on this amended resolution. All in favor? All right, it's approved on a 7-0 vote. Thank you. That
I'll
brings
move on
us.
the consent agenda.
All right, there's a motion to accept the consent agenda by Mr. Guines. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Glavin. And questions on any items? Let me start with Mr. Guines, since he made the motion. Any items, Mr. Guines?
I have none that I can see at this point.
All right, Mr. Glavin, any questions?
No, I have none.
All right, we'll start at the end in Ward 1. Mr. Lawrence, any questions on any items in the consent agenda?
Yeah. I have, okay. Mike on M. Mike like M. Double Mike here. We're doing a professional service agreement with Neil Schaefer and what?
No, you don't need to.
Good afternoon, Council. Glad you brought this up, Councilman Lawrence. First of all, just wanted to point out that there's a Scrivener's error on the third whereas in the resolution, where it says, whereas said amendment increases NSI's, which is Neil Schaefer Incorporated, compensation under the agreement by $29,952.00. That should be $27,000 to match the amendment number 1. There's a little Scrivener's error there. But on to your question, sir.
I said we're doing an agreement with Neil Schaefer and what we haven't accomplished yet.
What happened was FEMA, the Environmental and Historical Preservation Officer up in Atlanta, there's an area of potential consideration for the National Historic Register, and she directed us to enter into an amendment with Neil Schaefer so they can hire this firm to do some additional digging and exploration at this location. It's all funded by FEMA, but there's some areas along the coast they want to do some more exploration.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Ms. Newman, any questions? Mr. Deming?
Nothing, just note that I'll be voting in opposition to F, as in Foxtrot.
Mr. Glavin, anything?
Nothing.
Okay. On item H, This is the automated merchant services and Merit Bank for debit and credit cards by the city court. I didn't see a fee in there. I'm assuming that the company gets a cut or a percentage. That's it. So there's no cost to the city. Whatever cost there is paid by
That is,
whoever's dealing with that, correct?
added on top of the fee.
Okay. On item I, creating capital project 9999, and the purpose of this capital project is to fund capital projects as needed, establishing a source of funding for the capital projects as needed. Can somebody explain what that is? Or how that works? Peter can. Speak in English, Counselor.
Want him to explain?
This is primarily to allow a place to hold money that we receive from different grants or funding streams that are for just capital projects. I think in the past, we've sometimes put them into the general fund, put them directly into projects, but it's I think for better bookkeeping, that we'll have essentially a bank of capital funding type projects. And then when we need to draw on that, if we have a shortfall in some area, we can go into that area and apply for it. The infrastructure bill allows for a lot of things, roads, streets, bridges, water, and sewer.
You're talking federal?
The use tax, on the internet use tax.
Yeah.
So that's one of the sources, but if we had some other sources and didn't have an immediate need for it, we could put it into this generic capital funding project.
What about projects when they're finished and we close them out? What if there's a balance of a couple of thousand?
Exactly.
Would that go into this?
That's the other part. When we have something left over, we would put it into the capital project bank instead of sending it back into the general fund. And for bond proceeds, it's particularly helpful because we may have some left over for bonds, but it still needs to be used for a capital project down the road. So it's just something to help
The mechanism to help. That's right.
accounting and auditing and things like that.
And you mentioned grants, so if there are particular grants, they come in, they come with strings attached, they're still there, they're placed in that account.
Well, contingency, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was coming
So you're
off
an
the chair a
attorney
little-
now.
I was
Go ahead.
coming off the chair a little bit. I mentioned $7 million for infrastructure, okay? And again, we wanted to, as we proceed, if we're fortunate enough, that project, we have $7 million now, we'll go borrow $7 million. That's in that bank, if you will, and there may be opportunities from some other place, Fed ARPA or some of these other ones that would be, instead of using all the borrowed money for this, say, the Pops Ferry extension, it gives us a place, a mechanism to manage it if we're over or under.
Okay, so we're pooling all this project money, basically.
Right, almost like a depository.
Mr. Leonard?
Every grant is different. If it's a reimbursable grant, an MDA reimbursable grant, for example, we have to return the money we didn't use. In some grants, we can keep the money and move it. In a Tidelands grant, we can keep the money, but we have to have their permission to where we move it to, another Tideland project. So they're all a little different. But you're right in that virtually when every project finishes, tends to be a residual small amount of money. What we had been doing was sweeping that into municipal paving. That's a little too restrictive. So this is really just setting up a place for us to put residual funds.
Okay, thank you. One other item on item K. This is pledging repayment of the general fund, amending the budget, interim financing for capital project 1024. It mentions quarterly payments of the port. How many quarterly payments are we looking to receive to pay back what we're borrowing?
2.
Here, 2. Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to know. All right, any other questions on the consent agenda, Mr. Lawrence?
You can probably take care of this one, Mayor. We lost the deal with the property across the thing. Why are we returning the money? I thought that was supposed to be one of the options.
The way the contract read is if we couldn't reach an agreement, if the city was not satisfied, then the option money would be returned. So we're just following the language of the contract.
So you return the 10,000 back to him?
That's right.
And so where are we going with the problem now? We putting it back on the table, or what are we doing now?
There's no particular plan for it, I mean, right now.
I mean, you're gonna put it back out there to see somebody will come up with something?
We may or may not, I mean, we were mainly approached by them that time, so it's something to, I don't think we have any immediate plans just to say who else wants it. It's, we had a.
So right now, there's really no option, you're not doing anything, you just have the land sitting there.
Yeah, and since it deals with land and it's different people may or may not want it, if we want hard details, we probably should do an executive session on hard details, but right now, there's no immediate plan for it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions related to the consent agenda? We have a motion by Mr. Guines, a second by Mr. Glavin. Call for the question. All in favor? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. Mr. Deming has given us his exceptions. Are there any other exceptions?
Yes, I abstain from F as in Frank.
All right. Ms. Newman abstains on item F. Mr. Deming is a no on item F. Any other exceptions? There being none, that brings us to the code enforcement hearings. We'll open a hearing on Peter Cheney, 223 West Larkin Place. Mr. Creel.
This property is still in violation.
Is Mr. Cheney here or anyone with any connection to this property here to speak today on 223 West Larkin Place? There being none, this hearing is closed. That brings us to the next hearing, item B. Mr. Creel.
This is MJ Trust 2 LLC, 13301 Green Hill Circle. This property is still in violation.
What exactly is the violation on this, Mr. Creel?
We'll continue through the pictures. You should.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, is anyone here associated with MJ Trust 2 with a tangible connection or interest in 13301 Green Hill Circle? Anyone here to speak? There being none, this hearing is closed. That brings us to the next hearing, item C.
Patricia Jane and Ralph Jones, 343 Forest Avenue. This property is still in violation, but Mr. Jones is doing some work. It's going rather slow, but he did bring in a track hoe and he has started working on the swimming pool in the back. It had a busted pipe on the side, so he is working on it.
Suggesting giving him 30
I'll second.
30 more days.
Yes, sir, that would be a.
All right, so there's a motion to extend Mr. and Ms. Jones' 30-day extension. That motion was by Mr. Lawrence, and the second was by Mr. Guines. Any discussion? All in favor? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. Thank you. That brings us, that hearing is closed. The next hearing is Charles O. and Cindy L. Cron.
This is a 0 Wool Market Lake Road. I would ask for 60 days on this. Mr. Crone passed away, and we're working with a mortgage company now, and we need some time to sort through what's going on.
Approved the 60 days.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Lawrence for a 60-day extension, second by Mr. Guines. Any discussion? All in favor? That's approved on a 6-0 vote for the clerk. That hearing is closed. The next hearing is Nancy J.C. Phillips, and the property is 2255 Stelly Drive. Mr. Creel?
Yes, sir. I would ask for 60 days on this one as well. I met with Ms. Phillips. We went over what the violations were, and she actually came in last week and pulled a permit to start on the repairs.
So moved, 60 days.
Second.
All right, so there's a 60-day extension on a motion by Mr. Lawrence and a second by Mr. Guines. Any discussion? All in favor? It's approved on a 6-0 vote for the clerk. That brings us to the routine agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Lawrence,
A second
second
again.
by Mr. Guines. Mr. Lawrence, questions?
Wow. Hope we got some good news coming. At least no bad news. How's that?
Well, to start out this new year, MEMA is going to be, soon they'll put another 1.582 million into the pipeline, and then it hasn't hit the pipeline yet in their system, but it should within the next few days, especially after today's docket. We'll probably have in about 15 to 20 business days.
So we staying above everything?
Absolutely.
I know as soon as you get the money, Popo spends it, so.
Yes, sir. Burn rate, we're
All right.
burning.
That's good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments on the?
None.
There are none. Okay, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the routine agenda as presented? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. Is there a motion to recess?
So moved.
By Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Guines. All in favor? 6-0 vote. We'll take a 5-minute break, then we'll be back for a workshop on the proposed tree ordinance amendments. Thank you.